Hi, this is Ashley L. Jones, author of Modern Cast Iron, and today I'm going to tell you how to make a blueberry cobbler. Now, this initially came from my mother-in-law, and it's one of those recipes that's passed down from generations, and it's so super simple. And it starts with a cup of flour, a cup of sugar, a stick of butter, and 2 cups of blueberries or fruit of your choice. And I love that recipe. It is so good. But my husband and I went gluten-free several years ago, and so I had to modify it so we could eat it. And now my little son Gordon is dairy-free, so I've had to learn how to make this vegan as well. So I'm going to show you how to make this old recipe, a little modernized, gluten-free, vegan, and also free of processed sugar. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to start with a cup of flour. Now this is gluten-free flour and it's a mix. And I've used several mixes and I like all of them. So just pick the one that you like the most, but be sure it has a 1-to-1 substitution ratio. So instead of a cup of wheat flour, you would use a cup of your gluten-free mix. So we're going to start with that. Now because it's not self-rising flour, we have to make it rise. And so I'm going to add 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. We're going to use a ½ teaspoon of salt. Okay, so that's going to be our flour and it will rise. And so I'm going to give that a good mix here. Now, because we also got off of processed sugar, I'm not going to use a cup of sugar. Instead, I'm going to use ½ cup of honey. And I find that that goes really well with the blueberries anyway. So I'm just going to mix that in here. And because my little one is vegan, I'm going to use a stick of vegan butter. Now you can use Crisco if you like, that works just as well. And I found that a whole stick is not really necessary, so I just use 6 tablespoons and it's melted. So that's 6 tablespoons of vegan butter going in. We're gonna get that going. Now remember that initial recipe is a cup of milk, which we cannot have now. And so I'm substituting with almond milk. And again, I find that a whole cup is not necessary, but that depends on your taste. If you are looking for a cobbler that's a little bit more gooey, then you can use more milk. If you're looking for something that's a little flakier, more like a cake, then you can use less. And so I found that about a 1/4 cup of almond milk is really good. And so that's what we're going to add next. And really 1/4 to 1/2 cup. Let's see how it looks here. And I just use a simple fork to stir this in. You don't need a fancy blender for this at all. It's just super simple. Now I have my cast iron pan here and it's actually on the stove top. I just seasoned it and it's ready to go. And it's still a little warm. And I like that because it's gonna help me get a nice crust on it. So it's preheated. I think that's pretty good, but I'm just gonna add just a little bit more here. Almond milk doesn't have a lot of fat, so it's kind of tricky when you're baking with it, but it does work really well in this. And I'm just looking for a good consistency. You can see it really coming together, but we don't want it too soupy. Okay, now since I just pre-seasoned it, like I said, I don't need to add any Crisco or anything to it, but at this point, if you wanted to take some Crisco or oil and lightly rub it around your pan, this would be the time to do that, just to make sure it doesn't stick at all. So I'm gonna pour it in my pan, and I'm using a 9-inch cast iron skillet, and it seems to work really well for this. If you have a larger skillet, that's perfectly fine. If it's really large, like 12 inches, you may want to double your recipe. Otherwise, it's going to get really thin. Okay, so now we have our batter in the skillet ready to go, and we're going to add the blueberries. Now these are actually frozen blueberries We have blueberry bushes in our yard, and my mother-in-law has blueberry bushes, so we are stocked all year long. And so blueberry cobbler is our go-to breakfast and dessert when we need something like that. So use what you have on hand for sure. If you prefer peach or something like that, you can use that. And canned peaches work really well too. But we're going to use these, and I'm going to use as much as I can. Now, notice I'm adding them on top. I'm not mixing them into the batter. The way this cobbler works is that the bread rises up through the blueberries, and so it all kind of mixes together naturally. Of course, with gluten-free and vegan baking, things don't rise quite as well as that nice wheat gluten bread does, but you'll still see some of that effect. So I've topped this off as best I can, and we are ready to go. So I'm going to bake this in an oven about 375, 30 to 40 minutes, and we might even have a little side of ice cream with it. We'll see. Okay, I'm going to put this in a preheated oven about 375 and bake it for about 40 minutes. Okay, so we have our blueberry cobbler, gluten-free, vegan, free of processed sugar, you name it, but it is absolutely delicious. So I hope you enjoy this recipe. I'm gonna go ahead and plate it and eat it. And yes, Robbie and I are cheating with some ice cream. Gordon can't have ice cream, but he's gonna enjoy the cobbler anyway. Bye. Okay, I know. You want a little bite? You're dissing the cobbler. He's dissing the cobbler. He'll eat it later. Maybe. If you want some more recipes like this, from apps to desserts, check out my book, Modern Cast Iron, available everywhere books are sold. Now you want it. No, you're teasing me.